You might think a king's bedroom is a place of passion, but in ancient Egypt it was a brutal battlefield. Hidden behind the palace walls was the royal harem, a veritable city of women concealed from the outside world. In that space, the shimmer of gold mingled with whispers behind silk veils, and the taste of jealousy could be as bitter as poison. Imagine a young princess arriving here, essentially a diplomatic gift presented to the living god. She would quickly learn that her sole purpose was simply to wait, and then to compete with hundreds of other women, all for a single night of the pharaoh's favor. This colossal engine of desire was not only used to produce heirs, it also produced dark conspiracies, capable of toppling the throne itself. These are the secrets of the harem, and tonight they will be told. Welcome to Rites and Secrets. Our story is not about monsters. It is about kings who believed they were gods, and because of that belief granted themselves the right to rewrite every rule. To understand their behavior, we must first understand their worldview, because for the pharaoh, history did not begin with man, it began with the gods themselves. In the beginning, when the universe was only a region of primordial water, the first god, Atum, emerged from the void by his own will. In absolute solitude, he created the cosmos through an act of sacred self-pleasure. From that act, Shu and Tefnut, air and moisture, were born. These first two deities, brother and sister, married each other and gave birth to Geb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess. Once again, a pair of siblings became husband and wife. They, in turn, produced 4 children, figures who would shape the tragedies and ethics of all of Egypt: Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. The story of these 4 is a blueprint for the most earthly passions, divinized. Osiris, the divine king, married his own sister, Isis, while their brother Seth married the remaining sister, Nephthys, creating a family built entirely on incest. When Seth, out of jealousy, murdered his brother, it was Isis, in her role as both sister and wife, who searched for her husband's corpse. By magic she reassembled his body and, in an act of holy necrophilia, she conceived a child with her dead husband to give birth to Horus, the avenging god and rightful heir. These were not mere fairy tales. For the pharaohs, they were the constitution, the script they were compelled to follow. Because they believed themselves to be the incarnation of Horus, to rule, they had to live and act as the gods did. That was the license for all the horrific acts that followed. If this was a sacred script, why did it always end in ruin and decay? Keep that question in mind, because the answer lies in the nature of power. Our exploration does not begin in a cold tomb. It begins in the heat of worldly power at the royal harem, a grand monument built not of stone, but of flesh and bone. Instead of imagining a few wives, you must think of a miniature city, a separate world known as the Keru. Pharaoh Amenhotep III built a magnificent palace at Malkata, a massive complex with its own lake and gardens dedicated solely to his women. Meanwhile, Ramesses the Great, who reigned for nearly 70 years, is said to have had over 200 wives and concubines, and more than 100 children. These numbers speak not only of an individual's desires, they are a stark political statement. This was not a family in any sense we understand it, but rather a colossal collection, a living testament to the seemingly infinite power and wealth of a single man. Every woman within it was part of a transaction, a piece on a vast geopolitical chessboard. A princess from Mitanni or Babylon was sent over, laden with gold and peace treaties, but was in reality a gilded hostage who would never see her homeland again. The daughter of a high-ranking official was brought into the palace as a way to purchase the loyalty of her entire clan. Beautiful dancers from Nubia, young girls from all corners of the empire, were all carefully selected to serve. Their names were gradually forgotten and their individual identities erased, leaving them as silent satellites orbiting a single sun, the property of the pharaoh. Try to imagine life inside that space. A world of overwhelming luxury and suffocating boredom. A day began not with the sun, but with the rigid hierarchy. At the top was the great royal wife, who usually carried royal blood and could be the pharaoh's own sister. She was the most powerful, the mother of the designated heir. Below her was a complex network of lesser wives, who might also be aristocrats, and below them, innumerable concubines. Their lives were a long sequence of material wealth but spiritual emptiness. They lived in lavish chambers, wore the finest linen clothes, and ate the best foods, but they had no freedom. They were, in effect, precious birds trapped in a golden cage. Their purpose for existing was twofold. First, to please the pharaoh whenever he chose to visit, and second, more importantly, to bear a son. A son was the only ticket to gaining power and security in that environment. A childless woman would be quickly forgotten in the anonymous crowd, while a woman who bore a daughter might receive some favor. But a woman who bore a son would instantly become a major player in the game of power, because her son could one day become pharaoh. That automatically turned every other woman in the harem into a rival, and the air grew thick with the scent of perfume mingled with jealousy. Every word was an insinuation, every gift from the pharaoh a sign of favor or disfavor. The wives and concubines formed factions, allying with officials and priests on the outside to promote their sons, turning the harem into a center of political conspiracy. Through this, you can see that the pharaoh's power was measured by the number of bodies he controlled. Thousands of soldiers, millions of subjects, and hundreds of women in his golden cage. However, all of that was, in effect, merely practice. The pharaoh's ultimate and most perverse display of power was not in his control over the thousands of strangers. It was in his control over his closest kin, control over his own blood. Now, we leave the noise of the harem and step into the sinful silence of the royal bedchamber, where the fragile boundary between family and desire was completely erased. Brother married sister and a father could marry his daughter. In Egypt, this was not a socially condemned crime. On the contrary, it was a sacred privilege reserved for royalty. This was seen as a way to emulate the gods and to keep the divine blood from being diluted by commoners, a concept they called purity. Politically, it was a genius move, because by not marrying outsiders, the pharaoh eliminated any risk of another clan rising to challenge for power. Power was kept sealed within a closed family loop. But blood cares little for divinity or politics. It follows only the cruel laws of nature, and the evidence of nature's punishment is etched into the bones of the pharaohs. Let us turn to the 18th dynasty, one of the most glorious, but also one of the most genetically decayed. Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh, married Nefertiti, who may have been his cousin, but in his religious fanaticism, he did not stop there. Archaeological evidence suggests an even more horrific possibility. He took his own daughters as wives in a desperate attempt to produce a perfect male heir, one who carried the purest blood of Aten, the sun god he worshipped. And from this vortex of inbreeding, Tutankhamun was born, the son of a brother-sister, pairing in Akhenaten's family. His short life was a series of physical torments, a tragic testament to the arrogance of an entire lineage. Modern analysis of his mummy has painted a comprehensive picture of genetic decay. Tutankhamun had a cleft palate and a severely curved spine. His left foot was so deformed that he could not walk normally and had to use a cane. His tomb contained over 130 walking sticks, many of them showing signs of frequent use. Not only that, he also suffered from malaria and a rare bone disorder that caused necrosis and pain. The curse was not in the inscriptions on the tomb walls, it was in his very DNA. The family's tragedy did not end there, because Tutankhamun himself was later forced to continue the tradition by marrying his own half-sister, Ankhesenamun. They tried to have children to sustain the lineage, but the genetic curse continued to haunt them. Inside Tutankhamun's tomb, 2 tiny coffins were discovered, containing the mummified bodies of 2 stillborn female fetuses, a tragic and silent end for a great royal line, a dynasty that had destroyed itself with its blind faith in purity. One would think the fall of this dynasty would have served as a powerful lesson, but history has a tendency to repeat itself. Over 1,000 years later, when the Greeks came to rule Egypt under the Ptolemaic dynasty, they not only adopted Egyptian culture and religion, but also enthusiastically embraced this horrific custom of incestuous marriage, and with even more brutality. The history of the Ptolemies is a 300-year-long chain of sibling marriages, followed by mutual assassinations. Brother killed sister wife, mother killed son, sister killed brother husband. Power turned the family into a literal battlefield. The final queen of this dynasty became a legend, a perfect product of this diseased system. Quick bit. Would you marry and then murder your own brother to secure the throne? Let's see what happened to the woman who did just that, Cleopatra. She ruled alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, and married him. When civil war broke out, she allied with Julius Caesar, and her brother husband died in battle. She then ruled with another younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, and married him as well, before allegedly having him poisoned to clear the way for her son with Caesar. This internal chaos, a direct product of centuries of incest, weakened Egypt from within, turning it into easy prey for a rising power from the west, a power called Rome. The story has taken us from the control of outsiders to the decay within the family. There's only one final boundary left to cross, the boundary between life and death. The Greek historian Herodotus visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE and recorded what he saw and heard. One of the stories he told, though impossible to verify, has become one of the most horrifying rumors of the ancient world, a rumor whispered in the embalming workshops. He wrote that when a beautiful woman of the noble class died, her body would not be given immediately to the embalmers. Instead, the family would keep the body at home for 3 or 4 days. Herodotus explains that this was a deliberate preventative measure meant to allow the body to begin showing signs of decomposition in order to discourage an unimaginable desire from the embalmers, a desire for the dead. Herodotus even recounts a specific case where an embalmer was accused by a colleague of engaging in this morbid act with the fresh corpse of a woman. This story, whether true or merely a rumor, reveals a peak of depravity. The Egyptian obsession with perfectly preserving the body for the afterlife created a space where the darkest desires could arise. When the Pharaoh's power became absolute, and when the lines between man and God and between life and death became blurred, then not even death itself was a boundary. The sacred script ultimately led to ruin. The golden cage bred assassins, the sacred bloodline bred weakness, and the obsession with control followed them into the tomb. The Pharaohs committed their most horrific sins by looking to the heavens, believing they were more than men. But across the sea, another society was forging its own brand of horror, not by claiming divinity, but by stripping away humanity itself. Next time on Rites and Secrets, we leave the golden tombs of Egypt for the blood-soaked barracks of Sparta. We will uncover the brutal sexual rites that fueled the world's most feared war machine. Thank you for watching.